Hey there, welcome to Sleepy History Secrets, the channel where history puts on its corset, straightens its posture, and still somehow manages to faint halfway through dinner. Tonight, we're exploring what it was like to live with Victorian social rules, a time when being polite was a competitive sport, and every human interaction came with a manual, a chaperone, and probably a mild case of repression. Before we start, take a quiet moment to like the video or subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy falling asleep to stories of humanity's most overdressed centuries. And if you're still awake enough, tell us in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. It's strangely comforting to know that somewhere out there, in a world of sweatpants and Wi-Fi, someone else is staying up late learning about a society that panicked at the sight of an uncovered ankle. Now, dim the lights, maybe let a soft hum of your fan stand in for the London fog. Let's drift back to the 1850s, to a city thick with coal smoke, lace curtains and unspoken judgment. If your mind drifts halfway through, that's fine. The Victorians would have disapproved of inattention, but they also disapproved of nearly everything, so relax, breathe, and let's step quietly into the age of manners, where silence was golden, conversation was silver, and genuine emotion was, frankly, a social misdemeanor. You wake before dawn. The room is grey, polite, and vaguely apologetic. The air smells faintly of coal dust and last night's candle wax, the twin perfumes of progress and suffocation. Your nightgown is flannel, buttoned to the chin. It weighs almost as much as your conscience. You open your eyes slowly in case someone's watching, because in Victorian London, privacy exists mostly in poetry. The servant who stokes your fire arrives before the sun, ensuring you never have to confront the naked sight of your own domestic labour. That would be indecent, not because it's shameful, but because it's real. The house hums softly. Somewhere below, a maid is boiling water and the faint scent of soap mingles with soot. Cleanliness layered on top of grime, civilization built over a coal pit. You stretch once, discreetly. Posture was a moral category. Slouching implied spiritual weakness. Even yawning too widely could be read as emotional availability, which was, of course, unacceptable before breakfast. Outside, London is already alive. Carriages rattle through narrow streets, horses snorting steam into the chill air. Chimneys exhale their grey prayers to industry. The sky answers by turning the colour of old pewter. Progress smells like burning and sounds like coughing. Your room is lined with lace, curtains, cuffs, pillow edging, not for beauty but for modesty. Lace hides edges. It softens anything that might be mistaken for desire or efficiency. There's a small washstand in the corner, with a porcelain basin and a pitcher that pretends to be clean. You dip your hands into the cold water and remember that soap in this house is rationed like emotional honesty. A clock ticks somewhere behind the wallpaper. Time feels both urgent and ornamental, like everything else in your life. You're not meant to rest, you're meant to prepare, for breakfast, for visitors, for scrutiny. Victorian mornings are long rehearsals for not being yourself. You start by existing at the correct temperature, not too warm, not too alive. Your maid enters, eyes lowered, and opens the curtains halfway. Full daylight would be vulgar. She doesn't speak. She's been trained not to, but her silence has its own grammar. The creak of the window latch means good morning. The cough means the coal's running low. The soft scrape of the chamber pot means reality, politely removed. You rise from bed with the dignity of someone performing a sacred rite. Your slippers are lined with lamb's wool, a small luxury that squeaks faintly when you walk. Even that sound feels indulgent. Across the room hangs a portrait of Queen Victoria herself, young and severe. Her painted eyes watch you with the weary authority of a woman who has personally outlawed fun. The floor is cold underfoot, the kind of chill that climbs your spine like a social expectation. You think about the day ahead, breakfast, calls, letters, the endless choreography of appearing normal. There's comfort in the routine, like the rhythm of prayer, and about as spontaneous. You glance at your reflection in the mirror. Mirrors are a new sort of moral hazard, popular but controversial. Too much looking implies vanity, too little implies carelessness. You settle for a modest half-second of self-awareness before turning away, suitably chastened. In the corner your corset waits, coiled like an obedient predator. Mary, your maid, will lace it tight after she's lit the fire. She does so with the calm precision of someone accustomed to minor acts of violence performed in the name of beauty. The corset itself is a masterpiece of contradiction. Elegant, tortuous, necessary. It will teach your lungs humility and your spine patience. The sound of the laces tightening is rhythmic, almost meditative. In, hold, breathe shallowly. This is the daily price of being considered respectable. One vertebra at a time. Outside, the milkman shouts his route through the fog. Somewhere a church bell decides it's morning. You glance toward the window but stop short of opening it. London air isn't meant for breathing, it's meant for remembering. The fog creeps through every seam, turning the sunlight into something with texture. Soft, heavy, faintly carcinogenic. The fire catches at last. Mary nods once, satisfied, and steps back into silence. You murmur a thank you, the kind of thank you that's less gratitude and more punctuation. She curtsies just enough to acknowledge your status and not enough to make you feel guilty. Both of you know the choreography by heart. You sit by the small vanity table, brushing your hair the prescribed number of strokes. Too many suggest vanity, too few neglect. The right number changes yearly, depending on which duchess is currently considered a moral authority. The brush itself smells faintly of rose oil and scorched hair, the perfume of obedience. From downstairs, the first notes of breakfast preparation float up. Teacups, clinking cutlery, muffled steps. You can already picture the table, the silver toast rack, the folded napkins, the quiet war for conversational neutrality. You take a final look around your room, at the lace curtains that filter light like gossip, the clock that ticks out the rhythm of civility, the corset waiting like destiny. Somewhere outside, a factory whistle screams, a reminder that not everyone has the luxury of pretending. You exhale, carefully, because breathing deeply would crease the gown you haven't yet put on. And as the fog thickens against the glass, you realise something oddly comforting. In a world where every action is a rule, at least you'll never run out of instructions. The fire has been coaxed to life. It doesn't so much warm the room as remind you that warmth exists elsewhere, in theory. Mary stands by the wardrobe, armed with linen, ribbons, and the quiet authority of someone who knows that you, for all your breeding, cannot reach the buttons on your own back. The ritual begins. First the chemise, soft, white, morally neutral. It's the layer that prevents you from ever touching your own clothes directly. Then comes the corset, an object best described as a polite act of self-violence. Made of whalebone or steel, it squeezes you from rib to hip until you resemble the respectable shape of a question mark. Medical journals of the time, written by men who would never wear one, described corset liver, a condition caused by internal rearrangement in the name of modesty. The condition was considered unfortunate but fashionable. Much like fainting, it was a sign that you were trying. Mary pulls the laces tight. You breathe in. She tugs. You breathe less. The sound of tightening stays steady, like the beat of a sewing machine possessed by God. Each pull erases a breath, but adds a virtue. When she's finished, you are now both 2 inches taller and one confession closer to sainthood. Next comes the crinoline, the vast wire cage that turns your silhouette into geometry. It was once considered liberating, lighter than the mountains of petticoats it replaced. In practice, it simply made doorways narrower and fires more dangerous. Newspapers of the 1860s regularly reported crinoline fatalities. A woman brushing too close to a candle could ignite faster than her reputation. You remember reading one such story: a duchess at a ball, a spark, a scream, and an etiquette manual quietly updated to include maintain distance from open flame. Society didn't learn, of course. It merely added another rule. Mary lifts layer after layer, linen, cotton, silk, each more symbolic than functional. Every piece separates you a little further from the world. By the time she finishes, your own body is a rumour. Your dress today is a pale blue, high-necked, with sleeves that could conceal a small dog and the weight of several expectations. The fabric rustles like a sermon. Buttons travel from wrist to throat, 48 of them, because convenience is the enemy of morality. Outside, the faint clatter of hooves echoes through the fog. The milkman, the coal cart, the start of another day where everyone wears something heavy, including their consciences. Mary adjusts the collar, pins your brooch, and steps back to survey her work. You look like someone who belongs to the upper middle class, which of course is the goal, not to be, but to appear. You try to move, you can't. That's fine. Movement implies confidence. Confidence implies moral risk. Victorian grace is achieved by staying absolutely still and pretending it's on purpose. She helps you into your boots, the sort of footwear that makes you question whether walking is still considered ladylike. They button up the side, 20 small fastenings that require their own devotional patience. Every minute of dressing is a quiet education in endurance. By the time you're finished, you've already passed a moral exam before breakfast. In the mirror, you see what society expects. Posture straight, face calm, expression neutral but not dead. A woman prepared to face the world by suffocating gracefully through it. The corset presses on your ribs like a reminder that breathing freely is an act best reserved for men and servants. You ask Mary if the fire can be stoked a little higher. She nods, disappears briefly, and returns smelling faintly of coal smoke and competence. She was up 2 hours before you, but propriety demands you pretend otherwise. In this house, labour is invisible unless it's decorative. You slip on your gloves. They are white, the official colour of purity and impracticality. Each finger fits tightly, denying you any real dexterity. But that's fine. Touching things directly is a lower-class habit. A true lady's hands should be as unused as her opinions. Somewhere, a carriage rumbles past. A neighbour's window opens just long enough to display lace curtains, then closes again. Even the air has a sense of hierarchy. Mary stands silently behind you, waiting for the final nod of approval. You give it. She curtsies, an elegant movement that suggests gratitude, though it's really exhaustion in disguise. She'll repeat this routine for you again at noon for the walking dress, and again at dusk for dinner. Your day has barely begun, but her day never really ends. You check the small pocket watch hanging from your waist. The time reads 8 o'clock, which means you're already late for being on time. Punctuality is less about precision and more about respect. Arriving too early is rude. Arriving too late is scandalous. Arriving exactly on time is considered attention-seeking. You descend the staircase slowly, as decorum demands. Every creak of the wood sounds like judgment. The smell of toast drifts faintly from the dining room, mixed with the omnipresent scent of coal smoke and soap. You move carefully. A misstep could expose an ankle, and an ankle is just one vertebra removed from catastrophe. The mirror by the door catches your reflection once more. You look composed, immaculate, unbreathing. The embodiment of everything your society calls grace. Behind you, Mary quietly closes the door, the soft click of a life spent serving other people's performances. In the dim light, you notice your corset reflected in the glass, faintly visible under the dress's silhouette, ribs of steel under silk. civilization has always hidden its machinery under beauty. And as you reach the bottom of the stairs, spine straight, face serene, you realise something important. Every layer you wear is a sentence in a language designed to keep you quiet. Still, at least you look respectable, and in the Victorian world that's almost the same thing as happy. The hallway smells faintly of toast, coal dust, and ambition. The breakfast bell rings, 3 polite chimes that could summon both family and guilt. You descend the stairs slowly as etiquette requires. Speed implies urgency, and urgency is a working-class emotion. At the base of the stairs, the dining room waits, a battlefield of quiet precision. The table is set with surgical neatness. A silver toast rack gleams under the gaslight. Napkins stand like origami cathedrals. The teapot, shaped like moral authority itself, sits at the head of the table. You take your seat. Not the end, never the end, that's father's spot, but the side, 2 places down, where opinions go to die politely. Breakfast in this house is less a meal and more an audition. The correct posture suggests good upbringing. The wrong spoon ruins everything your family has worked for since 1837. Servants glide in silence, never stepping too loudly, never making eye contact, never existing more than necessary. Mary pours the tea with the focus of a surgeon. The stream must not tremble. A shaking hand is a social contagion. You thank her with a nod so small it could be mistaken for a muscle spasm. Direct speech at servants during meals is discouraged. They are meant to be invisible, which, for everyone's comfort, they usually are. Your father unfolds his newspaper like a declaration of war. The headlines shout about empire and railways, but nobody listens. News is background noise. The real drama happens between teaspoons. Your mother comments on the weather. She always begins with the weather. It's the only topic guaranteed to offend no one and interest even fewer. You answer with the appropriate amount of enthusiasm, mild acknowledgement without emotion. In this house, emotion is for the poor and the French. The air hums with the delicate tension of a family pretending to enjoy each other's company. Conversation at breakfast must never rise above polite volume. Excitement belongs to evenings, arguments to novels. Your younger brother, emboldened by youth and porridge, attempts humour. The room freezes. Humour before 9 o'clock is unbecoming. Your father lowers his newspaper 1 inch, the international signal for cease joy immediately. You take a sip of tea to diffuse the moment. It's weak, tepid, and tastes faintly of moral superiority. The Victorians perfected this, extracting all pleasure from daily rituals until only virtue remained. The toast arrives, crisp, triangular, and lifeless. The silver tongs gleam. You reach for butter, but pause. The correct sequence matters. Butter first, then jam, but never both simultaneously. Too indulgent, too continental. Bread must be broken, not bitten. Crumbs on the tablecloth are a small sin, and small sins are the kind that multiply. Father clears his throat, a signal that conversation may resume, but only within approved topics: weather, gardening, distant relatives, or the price of coal. You select coal. It's neutral, dusty, and endlessly renewable. He nods approvingly. You have chosen well. In the corner, the mantel clock ticks with judgmental precision. Every second reminds you that being respectable is a full-time occupation. Your mother asks whether you've confirmed your morning calls for the week. You have, of course, or rather Mary has. Still, you answer as though you personally arrange your own social calendar, because agency, even imaginary, looks good on a resume of morality. The milk jug trembles slightly as Mary refills your cup. You notice a small spot of soot on her cuff. Not enough to comment on, but enough to notice. That's the line between being kind and being cruel, acknowledgement without empathy. Your father folds his newspaper back into its original unread shape. He announces that punctuality is the foundation of civilization. This from a man who hasn't left the house before noon since the Crimean War. You nod solemnly, because hypocrisy, when wrapped in wisdom, passes for tradition. Outside the window, London is half awake. Carriages, vendors, children carrying water, men shouting prices, the steady heartbeat of industry beneath the fog. You envy them briefly. Their freedom to shout, to hurry, to exist without corsets or cutlery choreography. Then you remember, freedom makes noise and noise is vulgar. Breakfast ends as it began, with everyone silently grateful it's over. Plates are cleared by unseen hands. Chairs glide back in unison, each movement rehearsed through years of repetition. Father rises first, he always does. Mother stands half a beat after him, the measured delay of hierarchy disguised as grace. You stand next, careful not to appear too eager. Even standing has etiquette. Knees together, chin level, no audible bones. A brief blessing follows, not of faith, but of formality. Gratitude for food, for order, for the continuing illusion that manners make peace. Mary appears at the doorway to announce that your carriage is ready. You nod, because speaking to a servant in front of family is considered disruptive. Gratitude is better expressed through silence and perfect posture. As you leave the room, the smell of toast lingers, the faint scent of burnt virtue. Your corset creaks as you breathe in the damp London air seeping through the hall. You think for a moment about breakfast without performance. Toast eaten standing up, laughter unregulated, tea strong enough to remind you you're alive. It's a nice idea. But nice ideas rarely make it past the front door. You pick up your gloves, your hat, and your calling card case. Your survival kit for the polite apocalypse awaiting beyond the threshold. The mirror beside the door catches your reflection again. Calm, correct, unremarkable. Exactly what society demands. Mary holds your coat. You slide your arms into the sleeves, the fabric stiff from starch and social pressure. Outside, a carriage wheel rattles over cobblestones, a sound that could be thunder or simply another day starting politely. You thank her quietly, the kind of gratitude that must never reach eye level. She curtsies, invisible again, and as the front door closes behind you, the house exhales, releasing the faint sigh of 1,000 manners successfully performed before 9:30 in the morning. The carriage waits outside, but first comes the morning inspection, a ceremony known in polite households as running the home, and everywhere else as supervising people you've never thanked. The drawing room door opens with the soft resistance of good wood. Inside, lace curtains, ticking clocks, and the faint smell of starch and yesterday's decisions. This is your kingdom, small, quiet, and profoundly overregulated. A proper lady begins her day not with prayer, but with household management. Mrs. Beeton called it the mistress's most sacred duty. You call it Tuesday. Mary and the other servants line up like punctuation marks in human form. Their eyes stay politely lowered. Seeing too much is unseemly. They wait for instruction, the daily symphony of orders that will keep the machinery of respectability humming beneath the surface. You consult the household ledger. Columns of expenses march across the page like well-behaved soldiers. Candles, coal, laundry, meat, ink, silence. The sums don't quite add up, but neither does society. There are rules for this moment too. A mistress must issue commands with warmth, but not familiarity. Authority without cruelty. It's a delicate art, to sound grateful while also implying that your soul has never personally met labour. You address the cook first. She's been here 10 years, which in domestic service is either loyalty or captivity. You approve today's menu, veal cutlets and moral consistency, then remind her gently not to oversalt the soup. Excess seasoning leads to moral decline. Next comes the maid responsible for the linen. She curtsies, mutters, "Yes, ma'am," and withdraws with the speed of someone who knows she's both essential and invisible. Then, Mary, always efficient, always there before she's needed, always gone before she's thanked. Her expression never changes. It's the same serene neutrality as the wallpaper, floral, uncomplaining, and probably dusted twice a week. You give the day's instructions, polish the silver, prepare your calling cards, ensure the fire in the parlour burns modestly but continuously, like virtue itself. She nods. There's a small bell on the mantelpiece. It connects to wires leading to the kitchen and servants' quarters. A tiny sound for summoning an entire life. In the better manuals of the age, mistresses are advised never to ring twice in quick succession. It suggests anxiety. Ringing too loudly, on the other hand, implies temper, and temper is lower class. The correct ring should sound firm, feminine, and faintly apologetic. A domestic concerto in C minor. You have never once rung it correctly. A movement by the window catches your attention. The gardener, bent over a patch of roses that exist mostly to justify his employment. He glances briefly toward the house, the look of a man who knows more about everyone's business than the newspapers ever will. Servants always do. They are the silent historians of the house, chronicling every cough and confession in real time. In polite society, gossip travels upward, from servants' quarters to drawing room, purified as it ascends. By the time it reaches your tea table, scandal has been transformed into a matter of concern. You make a note in your diary. Speak to Mary about the silver. You will not remember what that means by evening, but the act of writing it down will reassure you that the household remains under your control. Mrs. Beeton recommended a daily schedule for women like you. 8. Direct servants. 9. Breakfast. 10. Attend to correspondence. 11. Moral superiority, as needed. You're precisely on time. The clock above the fireplace ticks its approval. Each second is a heartbeat of order, the only sound competing with the muffled hum of work behind closed doors. Distant clinking, sweeping, scrubbing. The invisible percussion of cleanliness. It's strange, really, to live surrounded by people, and yet be encouraged to notice none of them. Society tells you that compassion is admirable, but familiarity is not. A kind word to a servant is good. Remembering their birthday is presumptuous. Still, you find small ways to rebel. You thank Mary by name sometimes, a quiet heresy. She never responds, of course. She can't. If she did, it would make both of you uncomfortable. Gratitude is not meant to be a conversation. You glance toward the hallway mirror. Your reflection looks composed, competent, and slightly bored. The holy trinity of Victorian womanhood. Behind you, the room glows with polished restraint. Mahogany furniture, floral upholstery, a piano that hasn't been touched since the Crimean War. The piano is an important prop. In polite homes, it represents culture. In real life, it represents dust. You run a gloved finger along the lid. Spotless, naturally. Cleanliness, after all, is next to godliness, and occasionally replaces it altogether. The cook returns to ask whether she should include pudding at dinner. You pause to consider. Pudding implies indulgence. Declining it implies virtue. You approve, but only on the condition it be simple. Moral simplicity, like tapioca, is the safest flavour. In the distance, a bell chimes from the front hall. Your carriage has arrived. The morning's domestic theatre concludes. You rise, smoothing invisible wrinkles, posture straight, demeanour serene. A good mistress never looks hurried. She simply transitions elegantly between burdens. Mary helps you into your coat. The gesture is practiced. No eye contact, no words, just the soft choreography of service. Her hands brush the collar briefly, and for a moment, you catch the faint scent of coal smoke and lavender soap, the fragrance of work done without witness. You hesitate, just a second, before thanking her. She looks down, murmurs, "Yes, ma'am," and steps aside. The hierarchy restores itself instantly, like a reflex. As you leave, The ticking of the parlour clock follows you down the hall, keeping perfect time with your steps. Each second marks another tiny act of order, another reminder that everything functions beautifully as long as everyone stays in their place. The door closes. Mary exhales, and the house, for a brief moment, belongs to the people who actually live in it. The front door opens with theatrical precision. Outside, the fog performs its usual trick, half atmosphere, half excuse for not seeing the lower classes. Your carriage waits, black and gleaming, the equine equivalent of social insurance. The street hums with quiet hierarchy. A gentleman tips his hat to another gentleman of slightly higher income. A mate sweeps a doorstep 3 houses down, pretending she isn't freezing. A boy delivers coal, his face already older than yours will ever be allowed to look. London doesn't wake up, it adjusts its posture. Mary steadies your parasol and arranges your skirts as you climb into the carriage. The air smells of horse sweat, soot and faint ambition, the city's signature perfume. You settle into the cushioned seat, spine straight, expression neutral. Comfort, as always, comes with conditions. Across from you sits your mother, wrapped in shawls and authority. Her gloved hands rest on her lap, folded like a contract with God. She doesn't speak yet. The journey from house to society requires silence, the emotional quarantine before conversation begins. The carriage jolts forward. Wheels clatter over cobblestones slick with mist. Outside, the city drifts by in shades of grey and brown. Chimneys, gas lamps, advertisements promising miracles, beggars offering moral instruction. The fog blurs everything, turning London into an unfinished watercolour of guilt and commerce. Your mother finally clears her throat. Remember, my dear, first impressions are permanent. This is less advice and more a prophecy. In Victorian society, character is not who you are. It's how well you fake consistency. You nod, because nodding is what daughters do between corsets and destiny. The carriage passes a newsboy shouting about some new scandal. The word murder echoes faintly before being swallowed by the fog. Scandal is the city's unofficial background music. Your mother disapproves of newspapers. Too modern, she says, though she never misses a single headline whispered over tea. You glance out the window. The gas lamps flicker in the haze like nervous stars. A lady in a cheaper carriage passes. Her hat is a season out of date. You feel a brief pang of superiority, followed by shame, followed by the warm satisfaction of having felt both in the correct order. A crossing sweeper bows deeply as your wheels splash past him. He earns his living keeping boots clean. Not his own, of course. You drop a coin through the window because charity, like perfume, must be applied sparingly. Your mother nods approvingly. Benevolence is a family tradition. The conversation drifts toward the Fairchilds, your afternoon destination. They are new money, industrial, ambitious, slightly shiny. Your mother calls them respectable enough. In Victorian English, that phrase means useful if they keep quiet. She reminds you not to speak too much or too little, or about anything specific. Conversation should resemble steam, visible but impossible to grasp. If someone mentions politics, smile faintly. If someone mentions religion, look tragic. If someone mentions art, say, indeed, and stare into the middle distance. It's a survival strategy passed down through generations of socially anxious angels. The carriage turns onto a broader avenue lined with townhouses, white facades, black railings, identical respectability as far as the fog allows. You've seen it 100 times, but never your own reflection in those clean windows. Respectable glass only reflects light, not people. At a stoplight, or rather, where a footman holds up his hand like one, another carriage pulls alongside. Inside, Lady Pembroke, known for her laughter, her pearls, and the minor scandal involving both. Your mother's jaw tightens. You both pretend not to see her. That's the correct form of acknowledgement among the nearly disgraced, a shared performance of blindness. The horses snort, the carriage jerks forward again, you grip the edge of the seat. Beneath your gloves, your hands are damp, from nerves or humidity you can't tell. The corset creaks faintly, reminding you that breathing is a negotiable luxury. A gust of coal smoke seeps through the window. London's breath. Warm, heavy, and faintly judgmental. It clings to your lace cuffs, the way memory clings to regret. Some days the whole city feels like it's wearing a corset. As you near the Fairchild residence, your mother produces a small silver case, your calling cards. Each one bears your name embossed in careful italics, the social equivalent of a handshake conducted at a safe distance. You take two, one to present, one in case the first is smudged by existence. She inspects your gloves one last time. Remember, dear, never hand the card directly. A servant will deliver it to the tray. You nod. You've practiced this gesture before a mirror more often than prayer. The carriage stops. A liveried footman opens the door. The sound of the hinge, smooth, respectful, slightly exhausted, could be the anthem of your entire class. You step down, careful not to expose too much ankle or ambition. The pavement is slick with fog and social tension. Inside the doorway, you see a tray already filled with calling cards from earlier visitors, names neatly arranged like trophies of endurance. You add yours to the pile, a small rectangle of identity offered with grace and mild desperation. Your mother whispers, 15 minutes, no longer. In Victorian society, even politeness has a time limit. 15 minutes to prove you exist without showing any evidence of personality. You take a breath, or what passes for one, and step through the doorway into another drawing room. Another world made entirely of expectations, lace, and the illusion of control. Behind you, the carriage waits. The horses stamp the cobblestones impatiently, the fog swallowing their breath, the city returning to its eternal rhythm of movement without direction. You don't notice Mary still watching from the steps at home, arms crossed, face unreadable. Servants don't have calling cards, they just remember everything. The Fairchild's drawing room smells faintly of lilies, ambition, and overboiled tea. You've been here for 7 minutes, which means you have 8 left to appear interesting without being memorable. The butler takes your calling card and places it neatly on a silver tray, already crowded with other names, an archaeological record of obligation. Each card is a small passport to reputation, embossed, perfumed, and slightly smug. In Victorian society, friendships begin and end on rectangles of paper smaller than remorse. Your card bears your name in italic script, nothing more. Too much decoration suggests insecurity, too little, arrogance. The balance between humility and ego is exactly one engraved flourish wide. The butler disappears. You wait, standing in the exact middle of the carpet pattern so as not to favour one social axis over another. The wallpaper studies you suspiciously. Finally, Mrs. Fairchild enters. Bright smile, tighter corset, a living example of what happens when ambition marries steam power. She greets you with the warmth of a fireplace you cannot afford to sit too close to. Her handshake lasts precisely 1 second. Longer would suggest affection, shorter, disdain. You exchange the expected pleasantries. Weather, mild. Journey, tolerable. Health, unspoken. All topics sanctioned by Routledge's Manual of Etiquette, that quiet dictator in everyone's parlour. Behind her, a servant hovers discreetly, armed with a feather duster and 1,000 secrets. She pretends to dust a vase already cleaner than hope. You take your seat. Edge only, back straight. The sofa yields slightly, as if testing your moral stability. Your gloved hands rest on your lap, fingers folded into submission. Conversation begins its slow, graceful death. Mrs. Fairchild praises your hat. You praise hers. Both compliments are false but perfectly matched in sincerity. This is how alliances are forged, through mutually assured politeness. On the small table beside you sits a calling card tray, an altar to social anxiety. Every card within carries, meaning upper left corner folded, personal visit, top right, congratulations, bottom left, condolence, bottom right, farewell. Every fold a secret code in cardboard origami. You glance at your own card and wonder what yours says now. Perhaps here, but spiritually elsewhere. Across the room, a grandfather clock sighs. Victorian clocks don't tick, they judge. You glance around. The curtains are heavy, embroidered with the family's initials in case anyone forgets who paid for them. On the mantel, a porcelain shepherdess gazes eternally into middle-class perfection. Every object whispers, "We have taste," while quietly screaming, "And we can prove it." The maid reappears with tea. The tray trembles slightly, not from nerves, but from the tremor of 100 years of hierarchy. You accept a cup, saucer first, handle right, eyes down, tea too hot for comfort, too weak for pleasure, a perfect metaphor for the empire itself. Mrs. Fairchild begins to discuss her husband's new business, something involving railways, coal, and optimism. You nod at appropriate intervals. Your interest must appear genuine yet measured, like candlelight on borrowed silver. She pauses to admire your brooch. You thank her as though she invented sincerity. You compliment the lilies. She beams, unaware they're artificial. In a sense, so is everyone here. 10 minutes have passed. You glance discreetly at your watch. The socially correct visit lasts 15, no more, no less. Leaving early implies boredom, staying longer implies friendship, and neither is safe. Mrs. Fairchild asks if you'll attend the afternoon tea next Thursday. You say you'd be delighted, though the word delighted has not meant anything sincere since 1845. Still, an invitation is currency, and you collect them the way others collect debts. She mentions she's expecting the Pembrokes later. You smile carefully. The Pembrokes are rumoured to be eccentric, which in polite language means fun. Therefore you disapprove. The butler re-enters, an angel of rescue disguised as professionalism. He coughs softly, signalling that the next guest's carriage has arrived. You rise, smoothing your skirt. The clock marks 14 minutes and 50 seconds. Impeccable timing. You offer thanks in the tone of someone being graciously evicted. Mrs. Fairchild escorts you to the door, all smiles and veiled arithmetic. As you step outside, she assures you she'll return the call soon. In the complex economy of politeness, that promise is as binding as a treaty and about as reliable. The fog greets you again, dense, indifferent, strangely honest. Inside, another guest card lands on the silver tray, overlapping yours by a fraction of an inch. That fraction, somewhere between coincidence and rivalry, will be discussed at length over tea. Your mother, waiting in the carriage, raises an eyebrow. How long? Exactly 15 minutes. She nods, satisfied. Virtue, after all, is a matter of punctuality. As the carriage rolls away, you glance back at the townhouse, its brass knocker gleaming like a moral lesson. You realise every visit, every card, every gesture is a line in the city's grand performance. Nobody wants conversation. They want confirmation that they still belong. You breathe in the damp air. It tastes of coal, perfume, and paper. Somewhere in that mix, respectability still smells faintly of glue. You arrive for afternoon tea precisely when everyone else does. Late enough to appear in demand. Early enough to avoid sitting near the piano. The Fairchild's drawing room has transformed since your morning visit. The lamps glow, the drapes are drawn, and the air smells of bergamot perfume and mild pretense. A maid glides through carrying a silver tray of teacups, moving with the practiced grace of someone who could die of exhaustion without spilling a drop. This is afternoon tea, the crown jewel of middle-class performance. Born, according to legend, from one duchess's inability to wait for dinner, It has evolved into a full contact sport played with porcelain and suppressed emotions. The table gleams under the gaslight, sandwiches arranged by size, not flavour. Cakes so small they might apologise for existing. Jam served in crystal bowls large enough for debt but not for pleasure. You take your seat, edge only, on a chair that feels both delicate and judgmental. The teacup trembles in your gloved hand. Not from nerves, but because it is engineered to. Victorian cups are notoriously light, a moral test disguised as crockery. Across from you sits Mrs. Pembroke, a woman whose social smile has been carbon dated to the last decade. She leans forward slightly, evaluating your hat, your brooch, your breathing. "Lovely weather," she says. "Exceptionally mild," you reply. "It's raining outside. You both know this. Truth, like sugar, is added sparingly." Around the room, conversation flows with the viscosity of treacle. Safe topics only. Art exhibitions, servants, the decline of youth, and how tea itself has become rather strong these days. Politics is forbidden, religion is indecent, and passion of any kind is continental. The British Museum would later note that tea became the domestic equaliser, but that's misleading. Equality here exists only among cups, not people. The mistress of the house pours, the guests receive, the servants watch, the hierarchy remains flawlessly brewed. You lift your spoon. The teaspoon test begins. Stir clockwise, never anti-clockwise. That's French. Never clink against the porcelain, that's vulgar. Never leave the spoon in the cup, that's rebellion. The teaspoon, like everything else in the room, is both symbol and weapon. Mrs. Fairchild smiles at you from across the table. She is, as always, delighted, though her smile says, "I'm monitoring your stirring technique." You meet her gaze briefly, then look away. The exact choreography prescribed by etiquette guides since 1860. Eye contact lasting more than 3 seconds implies either affection or revolution. Someone laughs. You turn politely toward the sound. A gentleman, an uncle, or perhaps a husband misplaced from another conversation, is telling a story about a bishop, a fox hunt, and moral instruction. No one listens. Everyone smiles. Tea continues to flow, thinner than sincerity. You accept a second cup, though no one ever finishes the first. It's not about drinking. It's about demonstrating that you can hold fragile things without wanting to throw them. From the corner, the pianist begins to play something by Chopin. A piece as delicate as social tension itself. Music fills the silence, wrapping around the room like an apology no one intends to make. You find yourself studying the other guests. One woman laughs half a second too late. Another sips too quickly. A third adjusts her glove between sentences. Each motion is a confession disguised as grace. A maid refills your cup. The scent of bergamot fills the air, sweet, sharp, faintly medicinal. The British Empire's global reach, reduced to one fragile cup. Tea from India, sugar from the Caribbean, conversation imported from nowhere. You remember the manuals, never gossip, never speak of yourself, never mention illness unless it belongs to someone else. In this world, conversation is not communication, it's camouflage. You attempt a polite remark about a recent exhibition, something with landscapes and moral undertones. Mrs. Pembroke nods sagely. "Nature is very improving," she says, as though trees were invented to reinforce discipline. You smile. Everyone smiles. It's the most exhausting agreement in the world. At precisely 4:25, the hostess rings a small silver bell, the international signal that refreshments have reached their moral limit. Plates are cleared, napkins folded, and tea drained to the last respectable drop. No one speaks of leaving yet. That would be abrupt. Instead, the conversation slowly decomposes into weather again, like a dying language reverting to instinct. Then, just as the air reaches peak politeness, it happens. The front door opens. A gust of damp air enters, carrying with it the sound of a carriage and something more dangerous: spontaneity. A new guest has arrived, unannounced. Every head turns fractionally, as if by invisible choreography. Mrs. Fairchild's smile flickers. Unscheduled visitors are the social equivalent of earthquakes, small, destructive, and definitely someone else's fault. The maid whispers a name. You don't catch it, but the silence afterward speaks fluently. Mrs. Pembroke sets her teacup down with surgical care. You feel the collective pulse of a room preparing to judge. The intruder steps in, cheerful, rain-soaked, unaware she has violated the first commandment of middle-class peace: thou shalt give notice. Mrs. Fairchild rises with the smile of a saint mid-nervous breakdown. Mrs. Harcourt, what a delightful surprise. The word delightful lands with the weight of a dual invitation. The room freezes. Every teaspoon stops mid-stir. Every eye widens exactly one socially acceptable millimetre. An uninvited guest has arrived. A phrase that in Victorian society sits somewhere between public scandal and smallpox. Mrs. Harcourt stands dripping faintly onto the Fairchild's carpet. Her umbrella leans in the corner, ashamed of its involvement. She is smiling, the kind of wide, genuine smile that only people without social training or survival instincts can manage. Mrs. Fairchild greets her as etiquette demands, one breath of warmth, one exhale of ice. How wonderful to see you! She glances toward the other guests, silently begging them to behave as though this were normal. It isn't. You glance at Mrs. Pembroke. She's already leaned back in her chair, spine rigid with curiosity. Her expression says, I didn't invite this, but I will absolutely observe it. Mrs. Harcourt removes her gloves, a crime of opportunity. Her fingers glisten from rain and rebellion. She accepts tea without waiting to be offered it. The maid hesitates. There are no instructions in Routledge's Manual of Etiquette for this scenario. In the corner, the pianist continues playing Chopin, louder now, as though the music might smother impropriety beneath the weight of culture. Mrs. Harcourt begins to talk, not about weather, not about furniture, but about her travels, her horses, her opinions. She uses adjectives freely, a shocking breach of decorum. The other women exchange subtle glances. In Victorian London, eye contact is a weapon, and the crossfire is deadly. You try to appear fascinated without appearing involved. Your mother once told you that politeness is the art of appearing present while praying for death. You're performing it perfectly. Mrs. Harcourt gestures animatedly, nearly brushing a teacup. The collective inhale of the room could power a small engine. One more inch and she'll tip into infamy. Mrs. Fairchild interjects softly, a lifeline disguised as conversation. How lovely that you're out and about in this dreadful weather. Translation: please stop existing in my house. But Mrs. Harcourt doesn't notice. She continues, animated, unapologetic, alive. It's unsettling. People who enjoy life rarely fit into rooms like this. The servants have stopped pretending to polish. Even they are watching, though they'll deny it later. Scandal is a rare treat. Gossip, the only shared language across class lines. You notice the fog pressing against the window panes. London's eternal spectator. Inside, lace curtains filter light into politeness. Outside, the world carries on. Markets, factories, noise, chaos. You can almost hear it faintly, under the rustle of dresses and the quiet judgment of silver spoons. Mrs. Pembroke coughs delicately, the universal signal for change the subject before someone combusts. But Mrs. Harcourt is unstoppable. She leans forward and says, and of course, the vicar's sermon was dreadful. I told him so. The silence that follows is biblical. Somewhere, a teaspoon faints. You look at Mrs. Fairchild. Her expression remains frozen in the shape of civility. She murmurs, "How brave." The politest possible translation of "how doomed." Victorian society had many crimes, poverty, drunkenness, bad wallpaper, but none quite so dangerous as spontaneity. To act without premeditation was to abandon the fragile scaffolding holding everyone upright. The pianist, sensing the need for divine intervention, switches abruptly to something more uplifting. Mendelssohn, perhaps. Music swells, conversation does not. Mrs. Harcourt looks around, confused by the sudden silence. "Have I said something wrong?" Everyone laughs loudly, falsely, in a sound that could fertilize orchids. Laughter, in this context, is damage control. Mrs. Pembroke saves the day. She leans in with the ease of a woman who can smother chaos in lace. "My dear, you must forgive us. We're simply astonished by your frankness." Her tone makes frankness sound like a contagious disease. Mrs. Harcourt beams, misunderstanding perfectly. "Oh, I've always believed honesty is the best policy." The room collectively dies inside. Honesty, in this era, is tolerated only in novels and near deathbeds. Mrs. Fairchild claps her hands once, softly, decisively. "Shall we have more tea?" No one wants it, but everyone agrees. The kettle's whistle feels like salvation. The maid rushes to pour, her hands steady from long experience with disaster. Steam fills the air, curling upward like absolution. You catch your reflection in the teapot's silver curve, distorted, wide-eyed, corseted by context. You wonder what would happen if you spoke freely. Then you remember, that's what exile is for. After exactly 10 more minutes of conversational triage, Mrs. Harcourt finally rises to leave. She thanks everyone sincerely. Another faux pas, since sincerity is only appropriate during funerals. Her carriage door slams, and the collective relief in the room could move tectonic plates. Mrs. Fairchild exhales. "Such spirit," she says, which in polite dialect translates to "never again." Mrs. Pembroke agrees. A most unforgettable visit. They both sip their tea as though disinfecting their souls. You sit quietly, the ghost of Mrs. Harcourt's laughter still haunting the wallpaper. For a moment, you almost envy her. Her freedom to speak, to exist, to ignore the choreography. Then the clock chimes 5, and the envy passes, smothered neatly beneath protocol. Outside, the fog thickens. The world, as always, resumes its grey perfection. Inside, the tea has gone cold, but everyone pretends not to notice. The topic shifts as all things must, from impropriety to romance, which in Victorian London are nearly the same thing. Mrs. Fairchild's drawing room, still recovering from its recent scandal, begins its slow resuscitation through gossip. The air smells of lavender, lace and faint judgment. Someone mentions Thomas Fairchild, the family's promising son, and suddenly the room brightens, as though polite society runs on matchmaking fumes. You know of him, of course. Everyone does. He's handsome in the respectable way. No visible passion, strong jaw, limited vocabulary. He's the kind of man mothers dream about and poets forget immediately. Mrs. Fairchild's eyes glimmer with strategic affection. "Thomas has just returned from the country," she says, her tone a soft advertisement. "He finds city life invigorating. You're invited to agree. You do, carefully." Victorian courtship is a language built entirely on understatement and slow breathing. Moments later, the drawing room rearranges itself like a chessboard. Mrs. Pembroke begins to talk to Mrs. Fairchild. Mrs. Harcourt's empty chair is swiftly filled by a vase, and you find yourself guided toward the conservatory. A chaperone follows at a respectable distance, the human embodiment of surveillance. Her role, to preserve propriety by witnessing absolutely everything. Her weapon, silence. The conservatory is filled with ferns, fashionable, dusty, and almost alive. Sunlight filters through glass panes stained with London soot, scattering into moral fog. Thomas Fairchild waits by a table of orchids, every petal a metaphor for restraint. He bows. You curtsy. Neither of you exhales. "Miss," he begins, you reply. "Mr. Fairchild." Etiquette demands the exchange of titles before any thoughts. He comments on the orchids. You comment on their remarkable symmetry. He agrees. The conversation has peaked. A pause stretches between you, delicate as a spider's thread. Behind the fern, the chaperone coughs, not out of illness, but as punctuation. You search for safe topics. Weather? Overused? Books? Dangerous. Opinions imply personality. You settle for art. "There was an exhibition last week," you say, tone perfectly neutral. He nods. "Indeed." You have both spoken, and therefore fulfilled society's definition of chemistry. The chaperone shifts her weight, approvingly. Her presence hums like a minor key in a love song that never resolves. Thomas clears his throat. "You have excellent posture." It is the most intimate sentence of the decade. You thank him, softly, because loud gratitude suggests enthusiasm, and enthusiasm borders on lust. Outside the glass, rain begins to fall. Drops streak down the windows like faint confessions. The sound is steady, delicate, and far more romantic than either of you are allowed to be. He asks if you enjoy music. You do, though not too much. Passion for the arts implies idleness. He says he plays the violin, occasionally for moral improvement. You smile, a socially acceptable smile, the kind that reveals neither teeth nor hope. There's a moment of quiet, the kind that might, in a less supervised world, become meaningful. The chaperone shifts again, chair creaking like divine warning. Thomas glances toward the fern. You follow his gaze. The fern remains neutral, loyal to no one. Victorian romance is not a feeling. It's a performance review. Every gesture graded, every glance recorded, every silence marked, pending further clarification. He finally says, "Do you often visit town?" You answer, "When it's convenient." Translation, "Always, but only if you're watching." The rain intensifies. Somewhere in the distance, a carriage wheel slips on wet cobblestones, the sound of risk. Faint, but thrilling. You feel a strange flutter. Not love, not desire, but the mild panic of having nothing left to say. You both sip tea you do not have out of habit. Then, salvation. Mrs. Fairchild appears at the doorway. Her smile radiates strategic pride. "Thomas, dear," she says, "don't keep our guest too long." He stands. You rise. You exchange polite smiles. The socially sanctioned equivalent of a handshake between ghosts. He offers his arm, not for intimacy but balance. You take it lightly, as one might take communion. The chaperone follows, victorious. In the hallway, you thank Mrs. Fairchild for her hospitality. She assures you that Thomas always enjoys good company. You both know that's an exaggeration, but lying is the oil that keeps the wheels of society turning silently. As you prepare to leave, Mrs. Fairchild presses a small embossed envelope into your gloved hand. "For next week," she says, smiling. You nod. The universal symbol for "I accept this obligation" masquerading as joy. In the carriage home, your mother reads the invitation aloud. Dinner at the Fairchilds, 8 o'clock sharp. Formal attire, formal silence, formal digestion. She folds the card carefully, as though handling destiny. "Well," she says, "he seems quite respectable." Respectable, the highest praise and the lowest ambition. You gaze out the window as the city glides past in shades of fog and compromise. Somewhere in a conservatory, a fern remembers your conversation better than you do. The letter waits on your dressing table the next morning, pale and self-assured. It's sealed in red wax and smells faintly of rosewater, class and responsibility. Victorian invitations don't merely arrive, they materialise, like social debts with handwriting. You study it from a safe distance. The paper is thick, the kind that crackles softly when touched, as though aware of its own importance. The Fairchild crest is embossed at the top, a modest shield flanked by flourishes. Flourishes always mean money pretending to be modest. You know what it says without opening it. The format is a kind of sacred geometry. First line, deference. Second, logistics. Third, illusion of choice. Still, you open it carefully. Your name looks strangely foreign, written in gold ink. The letters curve gracefully, like obligations disguised as compliments. Dinner, 8 o'clock. Formal. There will be 12 guests, the ideal number for conversation and regret. You hand the invitation to your mother, who inspects it like a gem dealer confirming authenticity. She nods approvingly. Engraved edges, proper stock, accept immediately. In this world, paper quality is moral quality. Thicker invitations imply virtue, cheap stationery, moral decay. You sit at your writing desk, a battlefield of quills, blotters, and indecision. Etiquette dictates that replies must be sent within 24 hours. No sooner, desperate. No later, insolent. The goal is to appear as though you have a full calendar but still prioritise the sender's importance. It's social algebra disguised as gratitude. You select your best stationery. Cream paper, faint floral watermark, ink the colour of restraint. The words are simple, ritualised. Miss presents her compliments to Mrs. Fairchild and will have the pleasure of dining at her residence Thursday evening next. Every syllable sounds like curtsy. You blot the ink, fold the paper precisely into thirds, the polite fraction, and seal it with wax. The scent of sealing wax fills the room, warm and faintly chemical. It's the smell of promises no one means to keep. Mary delivers the letter to the post. She does not ask what's inside. Curiosity is a luxury of people without jobs. You thank her softly. She nods, as always, the rhythm of your morning's unchanged. That afternoon, you browse the stationer's shop for more cards. The shelves gleam with parchment and potential. The shopkeeper, a man who could identify a person's class by paper weight, bows slightly as you enter. Good afternoon, miss. Morning, wedding, or every day? You pause. It's an honest question. In this society, all correspondence falls into one of those three categories: grief, alliance, or boredom. You answer, every day, which is really just boredom with ribbons. He presents options: plain cream, sensible; ivory, ambitious; eggshell, pretentious. You choose cream because your mother would never forgive eggshell. He wraps the paper carefully, ties it with string thin enough to convey refinement but thick enough to prevent catastrophe. The entire transaction feels ceremonial. Money changes hands silently, as if embarrassed by its own visibility. Back home, your mother reads aloud a passage from Beaton's Household Management about the moral duty of written replies. A lady's handwriting, she recites, should reveal her character. Graceful, even, and without affectation. You look down at your looping script and realise your character is clearly tired. Evenings in your house often end this way, surrounded by correspondence and lamplight. The oil lamp hums faintly. Its glow softens the lines of the room, turning the wallpaper into polite shadows. You think of all the letters being written across the city right now. Thousands of women folding their emotions into thirds and sealing them with good intentions. In the corner, the clock ticks like a heartbeat with manners. You dip your pen again, practice your initials on scrap paper. The ink blot resembles a tiny continent of anxiety. Letter writing in this era is the art of sounding intelligent while saying nothing. Every "Dear Madam" is a prelude to silence. Every "Yours sincerely" a sigh disguised as closure. Whole relationships live and die between commas. Your mother reminds you not to use too much ink. Extravagant stains character. You consider responding with sarcasm, but sarcasm doesn't exist in this household. it's been replaced by embroidery. By nightfall, the invitation sits on your dresser, accepted, admired, and slightly terrifying. Dinner at the Fairchilds, a test not of appetite but precision. 12 guests, 8 courses, one chance to avoid saying anything memorable. You blow out the lamp. The room folds itself into darkness, smelling of wax, paper, and the faint melancholy of being perfectly proper. Outside, the city exhales, smoke, rain, and 1,000 unspoken letters rising into the fog. Tomorrow you will choose a gown. Tomorrow you will pretend conversation is nourishment. Tomorrow reputation will once again be set at the table, perfectly dressed, quietly starving. Evening arrives dressed for inspection. You arrive with it. The Fairchild residence glows like a cathedral to restraint. Gaslight flickers across polished silver. Every reflection gleams with moral pressure. Servants move silently. The choreography of invisibility rehearsed to perfection. Tonight's dinner promises civility, conversation, and just enough discomfort to remind everyone they're alive. You hand your shawl to a footman whose entire personality has been ironed out. In the hall, a butler announces names in a tone halfway between boredom and scripture. Each syllable lands precisely, because mispronunciation ruins empires. Inside, the dining room looks like an altar. The long mahogany table stretches into eternity, its surface covered in glassware, silver, and unspoken tension. Candles stand like witnesses. The scent of lilies mingles with roast beef and expectation. Mrs. Fairchild greets her guests with a smile you could balance a tray on. She gestures gracefully toward the seating chart, a feat of social engineering that rivals the railways. Every chair is an act of diplomacy. Who sits next to whom, who pretends to enjoy it, who secretly counts chairs until dessert. You glance discreetly at your place card, not too close to the host, unearned intimacy, not too far, irrelevance. Exactly middle right, safe, respectable, strategically invisible. Dinner begins. Servants glide in synchronized motion, pouring wine you're expected not to drink and serving portions you're expected not to finish. Conversation starts softly, as if afraid of the furniture. Your neighbour on the left is a colonel who talks exclusively in geography. Your neighbour on the right is a widow who collects opinions about curtains. You nod to both at identical intervals, the universal rhythm of politeness. The soup course arrives, golden and reflective, the mirror in which manners test themselves. The rule: no slurping, no spoon scraping, no visible satisfaction. Sound is the enemy. You're expected to eat in silence, which is difficult when the entire meal seems designed to resist capture. You tilt the spoon forward, never backward, that's barbarism, and lift it carefully to your lips. The soup trembles, considering rebellion. You succeed. Civilization continues another minute. Across the table, Mrs. Pembroke performs laughter at something the bishop has said. Her laugh lands precisely between amused and concerned. The bishop seated just left of Mrs. Fairchild beams. His position indicates spiritual authority. Her proximity indicates moral approval. Together they keep the universe intact. The hierarchy is dazzling. Men talk loudly enough to prove existence. Women smile softly enough to seem ornamental. Every gesture corresponds to rank. Even the silverware has an order of deployment. Outside in, never question. Always obey. The footman leans over to replace your plate with the next course. Fish, glistening and nervous. You pick up the correct fork, the one shaped like a moral decision. Someone coughs. Someone else says, delightful. Conversation blooms and wilts in 15-second cycles. You realize dinner in this house is less nourishment than ritual endurance. Each bite is weighed against dignity, each sentence tested for compliance. It's a marathon conducted in silk. Mrs. Fairchild's husband speaks. about railways, taxes, or divine purpose. Everyone nods, not because they agree, but because nodding is safer than verbs. The wine circulates again. You decline politely. Women drink only if fainting later would be inconvenient. Instead, you sip water and reflect that etiquette, like religion, functions best when it feels slightly dangerous to disobey. The roast arrives. Servants cut, plate, and deliver with mechanical grace. A single dropped knife would register on the Richter scale of scandal. The Colonel begins another story about India, involving elephants and providence. He laughs, the table laughs, the empire continues, dessert follows, custard, fruit, self-restraint. Conversation lightens but never brightens. Even joy here wears a corset. Mrs. Fairchild rings a small bell. The servants freeze, then advance, the motion of clockwork powered by anxiety. Plates vanish, crumbs disappear, silence deepens. The host rises, the bishop rises. The men follow. Then comes the moment of ritual parting. Mrs. Fairchild stands and announces, "Ladies, shall we?" You rise with the rest, your chair scraping softly, the sound of gender boundaries resetting. The women drift toward the drawing room, skirts whispering like conspiracies. Behind you the men remain, lighting cigars and discussing the empire, the eternal after-dinner segregation of smoke and silence. As you leave, a footman opens the door with reverence. The air changes, the scent of cigars lingers like a ghost you're not allowed to acknowledge. You glance back once. The men are already enveloped in smoke and confidence, the bishop gesturing with his glass. It's not that women are unwelcome there, just unnecessary. You step into the drawing room, the candles flickering softer, the air perfumed and expectant. Somewhere in the distance, a clock strikes 9. The evening's second act begins. You follow the procession of skirts through a door that closes like an era. Behind it, laughter deepens into smoke. The men's voices already louder, freer and less rehearsed. You envy them for exactly 3 seconds before remembering you're not supposed to. The drawing room welcomes you back to delicacy. Chandeliers glow with moral intensity. Lace curtains trap both light and conversation. The air smells faintly of lilies, perfume, and something sweet that might once have been rebellion. Here, among women, freedom exists in miniature. You may sit carefully. You may remove your gloves, one finger at a time. You may even laugh softly, as long as it doesn't reach the diaphragm. Mrs. Fairchild presides over the circle of chairs like a general who's read too many etiquette manuals. She arranges conversation as if directing an orchestra with invisible batons. The pianist begins playing. Quietly, of course, for fear that enthusiasm might be contagious. The melody ripples through the room like polite emotion. You take your seat between Mrs. Pembroke and a cousin of uncertain lineage. The tea service returns, now less about refreshment and more about repetition. No one here is thirsty, but everyone drinks. The subject, as always, is nothing. Not politics, too masculine. Not science, too radical. Not servants, too close to guilt. Instead, you discuss fabric, the kind of conversation that folds neatly and never stains. Mrs. Pembroke praises the lacework on Mrs. Fairchild's gown. Mrs. Fairchild demurs. It's merely Brussels. Everyone gasps politely, because merely Brussels costs as much as a small carriage. The cousin mentions a recent sermon about the moral perils of dancing. You all nod. No one plans to stop dancing. Religion, like corsets, is valued most when inconvenient. From beyond the closed door drifts the faint scent of cigars and brandy, the smell of confidence and colonialism. The men are debating something: railways, theology, or which colony requires more supervision. Their laughter booms across the hallway like cannon fire softened by velvet drapes. Someone sighs. I do hope they don't smoke too much. It's the most erotic statement of the evening. You sip your tea. It's lukewarm, harmless, and slightly too sweet, much like the conversation. The piano shifts to a new tune, something sentimental and predictably respectable. Music, in this room, exists to prevent silence from revealing thought. Mrs. Pembroke turns to you. You dance, of course. On occasion, you reply, meaning only when public decency requires it. She smiles knowingly. Then you must attend the ball next month. Such charming company. She says charming the way doctors say benign. A murmur of agreement circles the room. Mrs. Fairchild, seizing opportunity like a general advancing through lace, declares, "Yes, indeed, we shall hold one ourselves." Her tone carries the weight of empire and upholstery. The women applaud, softly, like rainfall on silk. Another social obligation is born. Planning begins immediately. The piano stops, the air fills with logistics. Who will be invited? Who will be tolerated? Who will be avoided entirely but mentioned fondly afterward? Names drift through the air like confetti made of lineage. Every decision is a strategy disguised as generosity. The Fairchild ball will inevitably be perfect, which is to say, exhausting. Mrs. Fairchild beams. Of course, Thomas will assist with the invitations. Your teacup tilts slightly. Not enough to spill, just enough to acknowledge the gravitational pull of implication. Mrs. Pembroke's smile widens. The cousin coughs softly, delighted by the unsaid. The air tightens. Every woman in the room can smell potential marriage the way wolves smell rain. Mrs. Fairchild waves her fan once, an elegant semaphore for let's pretend we're not matchmaking. Conversation resumes. Lace, lilies, moral fibre. Another servant appears, balancing a tray of petit fours. Tiny, perfect, and morally unnecessary. You take one. It tastes like sugar and social anxiety. Time passes the way it always does in rooms like this, slowly, gracefully, pretending it's not passing at all. Finally, from the hallway comes the familiar sound of boots on polished floorboards, the men returning from their smoke-filled summit. Voices approach, laughter rises. The women compose themselves, smoothing skirts, adjusting expressions, ready to resume their secondary roles. The drawing room door opens. A wave of tobacco and diplomacy rolls in. The men enter, eyes bright, egos oxygenated. The bishop declares the evening most enlightening. No one asks about what. It's safer that way. Mr. Fairchild joins you by the mantelpiece, offering a faint smile. You enjoy music, I hope, he says, still the same man who once complimented your posture. You nod. It has its uses. Across the room, Mrs. Pembroke announces, "A waltz would be lovely. Don't you think?" Mrs. Fairchild claps softly. "A rehearsal for our ball, perhaps?" Everyone agrees with alarming speed. The piano begins again, louder now, daringly alive. Chairs are moved, smiles reset. The air fills with motion and permission. Someone dims the lamps. The silverware on the sideboard catches the light one last time before fading into shadow. By candlelight, restraint becomes choreography. Even the silence has rhythm. The night turns softly, toward music, toward performance, toward the moment where even obedience begins to look like art. The night of the Fairchild ball arrives wrapped in silk and weather. Outside, carriages rattle over slick cobblestones, lanterns glow through fog, and the city itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for polite people to pretend they're having fun. Inside, the Fairchild residence is transformed into a cathedral of choreography. Candelabras shimmer, violins tune in resignation, and the smell of wax, perfume, and faint terror fills the air. You stand near the staircase, corseted into perfection. The dress you wear is pale ivory, the exact shade between purity and property. The skirt moves independently of you, like a moral planet with its own orbit. A footman announces arrivals with military precision. Names echo through the foyer, earls, colonels, widows, cousins, a parade of respectability in alphabetical order. The guests drift into the ballroom, each carrying the same expression: mild delight, mild dread, mild indigestion. The floor gleams like promise. Above, crystal chandeliers sway slightly under the weight of expectation. Every surface shines. Nothing breathes. A string quartet begins. The opening waltz, a sound so controlled it might be mistaken for etiquette itself. The dance cards are distributed, small ivory rectangles tied with ribbon, pre-written lists of obligation disguised as opportunity. Each line names a partner, a song, a moment in which nothing unsupervised will happen. You glance at yours. The first name, Thomas Fairchild. Your mother's orchestration, no doubt. Every romance in this city begins as a footnote in someone else's schedule. Thomas approaches, immaculate as always. He bows, precise, mathematical. The motion of a man who could dance with a mirror and win. You curtsy, smile, and take his hand, gloved and unfeeling. The waltz begins. 3 steps forward, 1 polite eternity back. The floor becomes a galaxy of movement. Couples orbiting each other, spinning at safe distances, gravity measured in decorum. Your skirts brush another's. Apologies flutter like butterflies trained for obedience. For 3 minutes, you're permitted the illusion of freedom. Your feet move, your heart pretends to, your lungs rediscover air. Thomas says nothing. Conversation is forbidden mid-turn, but his silence feels companionable in a society where every word must be approved by committee. The violins rise, the tempo quickens, and suddenly the room feels almost alive. You catch a glimpse of Mrs. Pembroke by the wall, fan fluttering with professional intrigue. She watches the dancers like a general surveying troops. You recognise the code. Every flick of her fan carries meaning, an entire language learned by women who were never allowed to speak freely. A fan half opened, interest, closed, and tapping the chin, boredom, drawn slowly across the cheek, flirtation, dropped on the floor, unrecoverable disaster. You watch the choreography unfold, the semaphore of emotions filtered through lace and air. The ballroom becomes a battlefield of subtlety. Your own fan, ivory and fragile, remains folded. Neutrality is safer. Still, you glance once toward Thomas, a brief flicker of rebellion. He doesn't notice, or pretends not to. Both are acceptable forms of virtue. Around you, the gossip machinery hums to life. 2 women whisper near the punch table. A gentleman adjusts his cravat with existential significance. A debutante spins slightly too fast and will be remembered for it until her death. The music shifts. Couples change partners. Your next dance belongs to a cousin of someone important. His breath smells faintly of entitlement and claret. He speaks of railways, morality, and the price of gloves. You nod with scholarly interest. In Victorian life, knowledge is less important than agreement. The chandeliers flicker. Someone laughs too loudly. It's a minor scandal. Laughter beyond regulation. Heads turn, smiles tighten. By the time dessert arrives, the story will have grown its own wardrobe. Thomas reappears for the final quadrille. He offers his arm, you accept. This time your steps are steadier, your gaze less dutiful. The music swells, and for a fleeting second, you imagine what freedom might sound like. Less violin, more wind. But freedom is not on tonight's guest list. The final note fades. Applause follows, brief and symmetrical. Servants appear with refreshments that no one will eat. The air smells of sweat, perfume, and mild triumph. Mrs. Fairchild glides through the room, radiant, victorious, the architect of another successful illusion. Such a charming evening, she declares, as though charm were measurable by candle count. Guests begin their farewells, each departure timed like the closing act of a play. You curtsy, you smile, you thank. Your voice feels like porcelain, decorative, rarely used. As the final carriage departs, The music lingers in your memory. The echo of footsteps perfectly synchronized. The hum of restraint turned into art. You stand by the open window, the fog outside pressing gently against the glass. The air is cold, real, uninvited. You breathe it in quietly, the way some people pray. Somewhere behind you, Mrs. Fairchild's voice drifts across the room. "Did you see how beautifully they danced?" she says. Mrs. Pembroke replies, "Yes, and how carefully." By morning, the Fairchild Ball has become legend. Not because anything happened, but because everyone agrees that something almost did. In Victorian society, almost is more valuable than truth. Truth ends stories. Rumour pays the bills. At breakfast, your mother reads aloud from a gossip column so vague it could describe anyone or everyone. A certain young lady, known for her elegance and moderation, was seen in animated conversation with the son of a distinguished host. You recognise yourself immediately, which is the point. Every sentence in the society pages is a mirror, flattering, distorted, and for sale. The Victorians have perfected gossip as a public service. It's how morality circulates. It's how people who never break rules still manage to have reputations. The British newspaper archive is full of it. Anonymous scandals, unverified sightings, whispered ruin in elegant typography. A single sentence could undo a season. A comma could cost a dowry. One paper even reported that Queen Victoria once frowned in a way open to interpretation. Gossip, like gaslight, is invisible until it burns. You take your tea in silence. Your mother folds the paper neatly, satisfied that society remains vigilant. Outside, the postman walks past carrying hundreds more letters of apology, invitation, and mutual observation. London hums, a vast machine fueled by sugar, smoke, and speculation. Even the fog seems to carry rumours. By noon, Mrs. Pembroke calls, ostensibly to return a borrowed fan, but really to deliver a weather report of conversation. "I must say," she begins, "the ball was most enlightening. Such chemistry in the air." Her tone makes chemistry sound contagious. You nod, smile, and attempt to look slightly scandalised. The golden mean between innocence and intrigue. Any stronger reaction would be gauche. In this world, your reputation depends on the precise management of facial muscles. Mrs. Pembroke lowers her voice. "Of course, people talk. They always do. It's the city's favourite indoor sport." She leans closer. "They say you danced more than once with Mr. Fairchild." "You did. The waltz, the quadrille, mathematically innocent, socially catastrophic." "Surely," you say, "no one noticed." "Everyone noticed," she replies, delighted. The conversation turns to others. Debutante who smiled too brightly. A colonel who drank the punch without divine supervision. A widow who laughed audibly. Twice. Each story polished, repackaged, and redistributed like fine china with cracks artfully hidden. Servants, of course, collect and curate the best material. They are the empire's invisible journalists. They witness everything, repeat selectively, and edit for dramatic effect. The upstairs world runs on downstairs information. Mary never says much, but you know she knows everything. She moves through rooms like an archivist of impropriety. Silent, precise, omniscient. If the Fairchild Ball were a novel, she'd be the only honest narrator. Later that afternoon, the fog thickens and the doorbell rings again. Another visitor, a cousin of someone who was almost engaged once. She brings news, which is to say, recycled air. "Such admiration for your dancing," she coos. You thank her. Admiration, you know, is gossip in its larval stage. The drawing room fills with polite murmurs, laughter, denials. It's the social version of breathing, shallow but continuous. You realise with mild horror that you are enjoying it. There's something addictive about reputation management, the illusion of control in a system designed for panic. Gossip, after all, is democratic. It makes everyone equal under suspicion. By evening, the city itself joins in. The street lamps flicker, the gaslight hums, and from behind every curtain someone whispers. A neighbour across the way watches your windows as you close them. The mutual surveillance comforting in its symmetry. You sit by your writing desk trying to read but hearing echoes instead. Laughter, violin notes, and the faint rustle of speculation. Every rustle sounds like your name. In another house across town, a servant repeats your story to a cook, who tells it to a delivery boy, who mentions it to his aunt, who reads it in the morning paper, where it becomes an anecdote about a young lady of refinement. And thus, immortality is achieved in 12 steps and no evidence. You wonder what the Victorians would have done with modern inventions: radio, tabloids, the internet. Then you realise they already invented all three. They just called them dinner parties. Mary brings in a fresh pot of tea. You catch her glancing at the newspaper on the table. You almost tell her not to believe everything she reads, but stop yourself. She already doesn't. You ask what people downstairs are saying. She hesitates, then says, "Only that you dance beautifully, ma'am." It's a kind lie, which is the best kind. You smile. She leaves. The door closes softly, sealing you inside the echo chamber of manners. In the fireplace, the coal burns low. The air feels heavy, full of warmth and rumour. Somewhere beyond the window, a carriage passes, its wheels clicking like typewriter keys recording the next scandal. You sip your tea, cooler now, faintly bitter. Reputation tastes the same. The rumour has completed its journey. It began as a whisper, became a column, and now it sits neatly folded on your mother's breakfast tray under the headline, "An Alliance of Notable Families." The article contains no names, just enough details to confirm every suspicion. Your mother smiles without smiling. "How flattering," she says. You're now officially almost engaged. Victorian romance operates on the same principle as Parliament. A lot of meetings, no visible affection, and everyone pretending it's about stability. By mid-morning, a note arrives from Mrs. Fairchild, embossed, perfumed, grammatically flawless. She writes that her son is deeply honoured by your acquaintance. In Victorian English, that phrase means negotiations have begun. You hand the letter to your mother. She reads it aloud, nodding approvingly at every adjective. "Deeply honoured," she repeats. "Such good breeding." And just like that, your life has been upgraded to a transaction in progress. The next week becomes a blur of polite visits and paperwork disguised as romance. There are meetings between families, lawyers, and occasionally the prospective couple, though only under supervision. Thomas visits, escorted by his mother and propriety. He brings flowers, white roses, symbolic of virtue or perhaps of horticultural convenience. He says you looked elegant at the ball. You thank him for noticing your existence. It's the most passionate exchange of the season. Later that afternoon, the fathers meet. They speak in the language of estates and endowments, shares and securities. Love, in Victorian terms, is measured in acres. The drawing room turns into a boardroom. Your father coughs meaningfully. Mr. Fairchild clears his throat in agreement. A solicitor writes something down, probably a future footnote in your biography. The marriage settlement is drafted, a document ensuring that affection remains legally binding. Your dowry is modest but sufficient. Thomas's income is stable and boring, which is ideal. Romance may flutter, but investments must remain steady. Your mother reminds you that good matches are built on mutual respect, by which she means you respect his bank account, he respects your silence. Thomas, for his part, seems pleased. He tells you he enjoys poetry, but only the kind that rhymes, and that he looks forward to a life of shared calm. You nod. Calm sounds achievable. You begin to notice the small rituals that accompany impending marriage. Everyone begins speaking in softer tones around you, as though engagement were a fragile object that might break if startled. You're no longer an individual, you're a future household. Even your reflection looks organised. Letters arrive daily. from distant relatives suddenly remembering affection. Your aunt sends lace, your cousin sends advice, someone you've never met sends congratulations on your excellent fortune, which feels both kind and insulting. In the evenings, your mother and Mrs. Fairchild sit together, discussing colour schemes and moral values. You and Thomas sit nearby, occasionally permitted to exchange brief observations about the weather, which in this context serves as a metaphor for destiny. When he speaks, you listen carefully, not because of what he says, but because conversation is now part of your resume. Sometimes you catch him looking at you with quiet admiration or calculation. In this society, they look the same. You decide it doesn't matter. Admiration is as close to affection as anyone gets in public. The engagement becomes official with tea and witnesses. The ring is modest, the applause louder than necessary. Mrs. Pembroke weeps decorously. Your mother beams. Thomas looks faintly terrified, which is traditional. Someone proposes a toast. You raise your glass. The champagne is warm, the moment colder. For a brief instant, you wish for something reckless. Laughter, a kiss, perhaps even a scandal. But propriety wins, as always. That evening, your mother reads aloud from Mrs. Beeton. Marriage is the foundation of social order, and a wife's demeanour its decoration. You nod. You've been practising being decorative your whole life. In your room later, you remove the gloves you've worn all day. The faint line across your wrists feels like punctuation. The end of one chapter, the cautious beginning of another. You place the engagement notice in your keepsake box beside pressed flowers, old invitations and fragments of lives carefully managed. The city outside murmurs through fog, indifferent but consistent. Tomorrow, tailors will measure fabric, jewellers will discuss simplicity, clergymen will be notified. Your name will appear in the society pages again, this time spelled correctly. The future will arrive with lace trimmings and legal witnesses. You lie awake, corset loosened, hair unpinned, hearing the faint tick of your bedroom clock. Each second sounds like expectation. Each minute an echo of something you agreed to by existing. Through the open window drifts the sound of carriage wheels, the world continuing, its machinery perfectly timed, its noise politely distant. Somewhere in another drawing room, someone is already discussing the wedding. Somewhere in another life, someone is laughing without a chaperone. You close your eyes. Tomorrow bells will ring. Not loudly, of course. That would be unseemly. The morning begins in white. Not just your dress. The air, the linens, the faces of women who have been awake since dawn, arranging flowers according to class. The church smells of lilies, candle wax, and good intentions. Outside, carriages line the street like moral punctuation marks. The organ hums faintly, rehearsing its approval. You stand before the mirror one last time, encased in silk, lace, and symbolism. The gown is pure white, a colour made famous by Queen Victoria herself in 1840. It was said to represent innocence, though historically it represented laundering privilege. Every fold of fabric whispers hierarchy. The veil, obedience. The gloves, restraint. The bouquet, botanical evidence of ownership. Your mother fusses with the hem. Remember, dear, not too quickly. Brides who walk fast look eager. You nod. Eagerness, like sunlight, is best filtered through lace. The bridesmaids flutter about like trained cherubs. Each holds a smaller bouquet, a smaller dream, a smaller chance. Behind them, the vicar clears his throat. The sound is part blessing, part schedule. Guests begin to arrive, their whispers echoing softly under the vaulted ceiling. You can tell who sits where by scent alone. The front pews smell of authority, the back of curiosity. The Fairchilds arrive on time, which is to say, early. Thomas looks pale, polished, perfectly prepared to enter matrimony as one enters a bank, cautiously with paperwork. He catches your eye for a second, then looks away, because direct affection before witnesses is indecent. The music swells, Mendelssohn, of course. No one risks originality on sacred occasions. You begin your walk down the aisle, every step pre-approved by committee. The dress trails behind you like a ghost of expectation. At the altar, Thomas waits, steady and silent. The vicar begins the ceremony, familiar words delivered in a tone halfway between sanctity and administration. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. You listen, counting breaths between phrases. Each vow feels like a line from a contract, solemn and strangely bureaucratic. Love, honour, and obey. The word obey lands softly but stays heavy. The vicar looks at you. You say, I will. Not because you fully understand what you've agreed to, but because no one has ever modelled the alternative. Rings are exchanged. The gold band slides onto your finger, a circle of permanence, ownership, and occasionally comfort. Applause follows, muted and reverent. The organ bursts into song, confident that heaven approves of logistics. Outside, bells ring through the fog. Children cheer, carriages shift, pigeons scatter with choreographed surprise. You and Thomas step into the daylight, officially upgraded to moral furniture. The crowd throws rice, symbolic fertility in edible form. It lodges in your veil, your hair, your sense of irony. You smile anyway. The photographer arrives, a man armed with glass plates in impatience. He arranges you by geometry, not emotion. One hand on the bouquet, one on Thomas's arm, chin angled at 45 degrees of virtue. The camera clicks, a single, silent explosion of eternity. You will now be remembered forever looking patient. The reception follows at the Fairchild home. Tables overflow with white flowers, white tablecloths, and the slow erosion of appetite. Guests murmur polite blessings while mentally ranking the wine. Someone congratulates your mother. She accepts as if she personally negotiated salvation. You and Thomas sit side by side, united in posture. He speaks about the weather, a reliable companion. You reply about the lilies because emotion should always be floral. Toasts are raised. Laughter occurs on schedule. Even joy wears formal attire. At the far end of the room, Mrs. Pembroke dabs her eyes and whispers, "So elegant." She means so compliant. The cake arrives, monumental, tiered, structurally significant, a symbol of prosperity and dental risk. You and Thomas cut it together, your hands briefly touching. Applause, candles, flicker. Someone says, "Divine." You suspect they mean the icing. As evening falls, guests depart in waves of well-rehearsed gratitude. Each farewell lasts slightly too long, as if politeness were the only thing standing between humanity and collapse. Your carriage waits, black and gleaming, horses steaming in the cool night air. Your mother adjusts your veil one last time. "Remember, dear," she says, "a wife's dignity is her husband's reflection." It sounds like advice. It feels like architecture. Thomas helps you in. The door closes. The wheels begin to turn. You exhale for the first time all day. Through the small carriage window, you watch the church recede. Candles glowing like distant promises. The streets blur into grey. Perfume fades into leather and horse sweat. You are married now, which in this society means you have finally become respectable enough to disappear. The carriage lurches forward, and so does your life. Outside, fog drifts through the gaslight like incense for the god of propriety. Inside, you sit perfectly upright beside your new husband, both of you silent, reverent, and slightly upholstered. The air smells of leather, lilies, and horse sweat, the natural perfume of union. The seats creak softly, adjusting to new hierarchies. Even the upholstery knows its place. Thomas glances at you, polite as a promise. He says, "Are you comfortable?" You answer, "Of course," which is the safest lie in any language. Comfort is for furniture, not wives. The horses clatter over cobblestones slick with drizzle. Street lamps slide past the window like polite applause. London, dim and infinite, watches you glide away, a pair of silhouettes bound by ceremony and shared restraint. Your mother's voice echoes faintly in your head, that final sermon before departure. Remember, dear, grace in all things, patience in silence, and never contradict your husband unless he's wrong in front of clergy. She called it advice. You recognised it as prophecy. Thomas clears his throat. A fine ceremony. You nod. Indeed. Both of you seem to be reading from the same etiquette manual, one word at a time. The silence that follows is respectable, long, and filled with the faint rhythm of hooves. Outside, a flower seller waves from the curb, her basket a burst of colour against grey stone. You almost wave back, but stop yourself. Wives don't acknowledge strangers from carriages. That's how revolutions begin. Thomas gestures toward the window. We'll be home soon. Home. A new word, same structure. Different wallpaper, identical expectations. The carriage slows briefly to avoid a crossing sweeper, a small boy with a broom larger than ambition. He bows as you pass, a practiced motion somewhere between respect and habit. You feel the flicker of pity but say nothing. Empathy, like perfume, is applied sparingly in public. Thomas resumes talking about the estate, the staff, the new dining service. You listen the way one listens to a sermon, for tone, not content. He speaks of efficiency, accounts, punctual dinners. You think of silence, space, and air that isn't rehearsed. The horses pick up speed. Rain begins to patter on the roof. A polite applause from the heavens. The rhythm soothes like breathing through layers of velvet. Thomas adjusts his gloves. I hope you'll find everything to your liking. You assure him you will. The sentence lands between gratitude and surrender. Outside, the fog thickens. The world beyond the window turns spectral, lamplight dissolving into motion. Somewhere a street musician plays a violin too passionately for the hour. You wonder if anyone has ever been scolded for enthusiasm. Probably. The carriage turns onto a quieter road. Houses grow larger, hedges higher. Each one glows faintly with the comfort of people who never sweat in public. You glance down at your gloves. The left one bears a small smudge, perhaps from the rice, perhaps from the world. You resist the urge to remove it. Cleanliness must wait until privacy is declared. Thomas shifts slightly, as though remembering he's meant to be reassuring. I imagine this must be overwhelming, you smile politely. Not at all. It is, but honesty isn't a wedding gift. He relaxes, misunderstanding beautifully. The carriage hits a small rut. You sway, instinctively reaching for balance. His gloved hand steadies yours. A brief touch, brief enough to count as respectable affection. The moment passes. The horses snort. The fog presses closer, wrapping the city in its endless grey silk. You pass through a narrow street where the smell changes. Damp earth, cold smoke, roasted chestnuts from a vendor's cart. For a fleeting moment it smells like life unchaperoned. Then the scent fades, replaced again by leather and restraint. Thomas peers out the window. Nearly there, you follow his gaze. Ahead, through the haze, looms the outline of the house. Your new address, your new identity, your next performance. The carriage slows, wheels crunching over gravel with the solemnity of ritual. Servants wait outside under the porch light, arranged by height and usefulness. Their faces flicker between curiosity and indifference. The butler opens the door. You descend, one gloved hand on the polished brass rail. The air outside smells of coal and roses, the domestic version of hope. Thomas offers his arm. You take it because the world is still watching. Behind you, the carriage door shuts softly, ending one chapter and muffling the sound of the hooves departing into the fog. The front door opens. Warmth greets you like a contract. Inside, the hall gleams. Portraits of ancestors line the walls, each painted in tones of solemn triumph, proof that endurance passes for success. Thomas says, "Welcome home." You smile, because that's what's written in the script. Home, a word that smells of polish, candle wax, and quiet expectations. For a brief moment, the silence between you feels almost human. Then the house breathes, clocks ticking, servants moving, reality resuming its posture. You step forward, into the echo of your own footsteps, into the life already waiting to be managed. The front door closes behind you with the solemn authority of a vow renewed. You're no longer a guest, nor quite a person. You're a mistress, capital M. A title that sounds powerful but feels like an unpaid internship in morality. The hall gleams with the effort of invisible labour. Candles burn with disciplined brightness. Portraits stare with hereditary disapproval. The air smells of polish, coal, and recent instruction. Mrs. Harcourt's chaos feels centuries away. Here, everything has rules, from the shine of the silver to the permitted decibel level of gratitude. Thomas guides you through the rooms as though unveiling a museum exhibit. The drawing room, the library, the breakfast parlour, the green morning room, well, you'll learn them all soon enough. You nod because orientation requires obedience. Each doorway reveals more symmetry than life should contain. Even the furniture looks well behaved. A housekeeper appears, curtsies precisely. "Mrs. Fairchild," she says, your new name still wet from ceremony. She lists the staff with military precision: cook, housemaid, scullery maid, gardener, and 2 footmen who appear to exist entirely in reflection. You're expected to remember all their names by breakfast. Thomas excuses himself. Some correspondence to attend to. He leaves through the nearest door, swallowed by mahogany and duty. You remain in the echo, feeling both present and ornamental. The housekeeper waits for instruction. This is the moment your new identity becomes administrative. You recall the chapters in Mrs. Beaton's household management on the duties of the mistress, an optimistic title for an impossible job. You're expected to maintain the moral and logistical stability of an empire made of upholstery. You clear your throat. "Please see that dinner is just simple," she nods, vanishes with the efficiency of a ghost who's paid quarterly. Left alone, you wander through the house. The clock ticks in every room, synchronized to the heartbeat of responsibility. Time here doesn't pass, it supervises. In the drawing room, the piano sits untouched, sheet music arranged for admiration rather than use. A vase of lilies perfumes the air with polite melancholy. You brush a fingertip across the polished surface of the mantel and immediately regret it. Cleanliness is next to godliness, and you've just sinned. A knock at the doorframe. Mary enters, carrying folded linens. The same careful grace, the same quiet. You didn't expect to see her here, but apparently your mother arranged a transfer. Her loyalty, like the furniture, came with the marriage. "Welcome, Mum," she says, softly. Her tone is unchanged. Her eyes notice everything. You feel a brief relief. One familiar person in a sea of strangers. Then you remember, even friendship must be performed in lowercase. "Thank you, Mary. Everything looks perfect." She nods. "Yes, Ma'am." The word perfect lingers in the air like candle smoke, plissing, then faintly suffocating. When she leaves, the silence deepens again, thick with potential disappointment. You sit on the edge of the embroidered sofa, not too far in, lest you wrinkle the fabric of civilization. The clock on the mantel ticks toward evening. At 7, dinner is announced. The table glitters, symmetrical and sterile. Thomas sits at the head. You sit at his right. Between you, the correct distance of affection, 1 candelabrum, 2 crystal goblets, and an ocean of formality. The meal proceeds as though choreographed by a modest god. Soup, roast, pudding, nothing resembling surprise. You comment on the seasoning. He agrees it's well judged. Conversation, like the pudding, sets quickly. After dinner, he retires to his study. You're left to perform the nightly ritual of oversight, ensuring candles are extinguished, doors locked, and virtue maintained at room temperature. You find Mary again in the hallway. She's inspecting a stain on the stair runner with quiet contempt. You hesitate before asking, "Is it strange, working here?" She looks up, expression unreadable. "It's a house, Ma'am. They're all the same once you start cleaning them." You almost laugh, but don't. Humour belongs downstairs. In your room, the fire crackles with disciplined warmth. A dressing table gleams under lamplight, its mirror reflecting a woman who looks exactly as society intended. Tidy, tranquil, temporarily alive. You unpin your hair, each pin a small concession to fatigue. From outside, the city hums, distant and unbothered by your perfection. You realise that power in this house means responsibility for things that will never thank you. Curtains, servants, reputation. It's less a crown than a checklist. Somewhere below, a door closes. Footsteps fade. The clock resumes its steady authority. You inhale the smell of coal and starch, the scent of cleanliness, which is not the same as comfort. Then you exhale slowly, almost deliberately. The house doesn't like sighing. The house is asleep. Finally. Downstairs, the fire's burned itself into silence. Clocks tick in agreement. Somewhere in the distance, a door sighs. Old wood exhaling another day of good behaviour. You sit alone in your dressing room, still half-armoured in lace and expectation. The mirror reflects the faint shimmer of candlelight, your own face blurred by exhaustion and fabric. You unfasten the first button at your collar. The sound small but revolutionary. Then another, and another. The corset sighs as it loosens, a quiet groan of surrender. For the first time today, you breathe all the way to the bottom of your lungs. It hurts a little. Freedom often does at first. Outside, the wind stirs faintly, brushing against the window panes like a memory trying to get in. Somewhere down the hall, Thomas's study lamp clicks out. The night grows thicker, gentler, realer. You look around your room, wallpaper repeating its pattern without complaint, curtains heavy with embroidered restraint, a bed so perfectly made it looks theoretical. Everything here is exact. Nothing here is you. You stand, stretching muscles long denied permission. The silk nightgown rustles softly, a fabric not meant for rebellion, but trying its best. In the corner stands a wardrobe that smells faintly of lavender and moral expectation. Behind it, folded carefully, lies a second dress, not white, not cream, not respectable. Black. You touch it, fingertips brushing fabric forbidden to youth, reserved for widows, artists, or women who read too much. You're not any of those things. Yet. The black dress feels cool and deliberate, a secret you didn't know you owned. You remember hearing once that mourning clothes were comforting because they let you breathe without smiling. You understand that now. Somewhere inside you the day unravels. You think of the church, the vows, the polite applause, the dinner, the ticking. Each memory folds neatly into fatigue. Even perfection is heavy when carried all day. You open the window a little. Cold air slips in, bringing with it the smell of coal, rain, and someone else's freedom. The city hums below, unseen people walking home, vendors closing stalls, laughter rising from taverns too far away to judge. You close your eyes and listen. The world outside is imperfect and alive. You envy it the way saints envy sin. On your dressing table sits a small silver brush, a wedding gift from your aunt. You pick it up, turn it over in your hand. Your reflection in its back is warped, human, and somehow more honest than the one in the mirror. You brush your hair slowly, each stroke uncoiling another rule. 12 strokes for modesty, 12 more for penance, 12 just because no one's watching. The hair falls loose over your shoulders. Wild, disobedient, still technically clean. The candle flickers, its light softening into gold. Shadows move along the walls, faint, fluttering ghosts of movement denied all day. You inhale. The room smells of wax, starch, and the faint sweetness of old perfume. It smells like something ending politely. You glance at the corset draped across the chair. It stays glinting under candlelight like the bones of a small, well-trained animal. You wonder how long before you put it back on again. Probably at dawn. But for now, it can rest. You pick up Beaton's Household Management from the nightstand, not to read, but to remind yourself of what you've escaped for the next few hours. Its pages rustle softly, self-assured, certain that everything important can be alphabetized. You set it aside. No one should fall asleep next to advice. For a while, you do nothing, not planning, not worrying, not remembering, just breathing, the most unladylike act of all. Through the window, a lamplight flickers on the street below, casting a faint amber glow on the wall. It feels alive, defiant, almost kind. You imagine the servants below, finishing their work, washing, sweeping, finally speaking freely in voices never used upstairs. Mary, perhaps, laughing softly in the kitchen, her hands still smelling of soap and survival. You find comfort in that sound you can't hear. A clock chimes midnight. You smile. Tomorrow will arrive soon, wearing all its usual rules. But for now, the house belongs to no one. The silence is yours. You lie back on the bed, unmade, improper, wonderful. The candle burns lower. The air smells of wax and rebellion. Your corset hangs from the chair like a retired soldier. Your breath, finally audible, fills the room. The night folds around you like mercy. Morning arrives on tiptoe. The city exhales a long grey breath, and the light that slips through your curtains feels almost polite. The performance is over, for now, but the stage hasn't been struck. You open your eyes to the faint smell of candle smoke and rosewater, the scent of yesterday still hanging politely in the air. Your corset waits where you left it, disciplined, patient, judgmental. It doesn't move, but somehow it seems to know. You sit up slowly, listening. The house below begins its quiet resurrection. Footsteps, kettle whistles, the sigh of carpets under routine. Every sound perfectly trained. For a moment, you stay still. The bedsheets are wrinkled, a small scandal. You smooth them out automatically. Even rebellion leaves tidy evidence. In the mirror, your hair has undone itself, curling at the edges like a secret that refuses to stay polite. You brush it once, out of habit, then stop. Let it be. For one morning, you'll let something exist without supervision. The window lets in the smell of damp stone and cold smoke, London's idea of honesty. You pull the curtains wider. Outside, a milk cart rattles past. A paperboy shouts the headlines. Somewhere, a neighbour's dog insists on being real. You think of yesterday, the vows, the lace, the rules. It all feels distant, like someone else's well-behaved dream. Marriage, it turns out, is not transformation. It's continuation, just with better wallpaper. The maid knocks softly. "Breakfast, ma'am," you answer. "In a moment." Your voice sounds strange, not timid, not obedient, simply yours. When you finally rise, the floorboards creak beneath your bare feet. No slippers, no pretense. The sound startles you. Small, human, unapproved. It's the most honest noise you've made in weeks. Downstairs, the morning rituals resume their rhythm. Thomas is already in his study, measuring purpose with pen and paper. The servants move like clock hands, keeping order while pretending not to exist. You pour your own cup of tea, forbidden efficiency. It tastes slightly stronger, slightly wrong, and completely perfect. On the sideboard sits yesterday's bouquet, lilies beginning to wilt. You touch one petal, it gives way softly under your fingers. Even flowers can't keep up appearances forever. The newspaper lies folded beside your teacup. You glance at the headlines: railways, colonies, parliament. Between the lines, the same old melody. Progress pretending to be peace. You turn to the window again. The fog has lifted just enough to reveal rooftops and chimneys, the skeleton of the city stretching itself awake. Somewhere out there, other women are doing exactly what you're doing, performing normalcy with precision. You imagine their breakfasts, their teacups, their silent rebellions. A servant enters quietly to ask about dinner plans. You tell her, something simple. The phrase echoes from the night before, but this time it feels less like instruction, more like wish. She nods. Yes, ma'am. As she leaves, you notice she hums softly, a tune not meant for upstairs ears. You listen until the sound disappears down the corridor. You sit for a long time, doing nothing remarkable. The room smells faintly of dust, tea, and melted wax. The fire crackles once, then settles into a steady, forgiving warmth. You realise in a quiet and unceremonious way that this is peace, not joy, not triumph, just the small space between pretending and forgetting. It's enough. On your desk lies an unopened letter from your mother. You decide to leave it that way until evening. Some obligations, like corsets, can wait. Outside, the bells of St. Mary's begin their slow morning toll, 3 notes carried by cold air and repetition. Once, they signalled duty. Now, they sound like endurance, or maybe grace. You pick up your teacup. The porcelain is warm. Steam curls upward, tracing invisible patterns that disappear before they finish. You watch until the cup is empty, and for once, you don't refill it. You breathe. You exist. That's all. The candle on the mantel sputters softly, its wax running into slow, golden rivers. The smell mingles with rosewater and faint smoke, the scent of civilization pretending to be eternal. You almost laugh. At the far edge of your reflection, the morning light finds your face again, not painted, not powdered, not posed, just present. It's an unfamiliar sight, but not unpleasant. Downstairs, a door closes. The day begins again. Outside, London continues its patient performance, the orchestra of footsteps, wheels and whispers resuming right on cue. But here, in this small room, the curtain has fallen. The stage is empty. And for the first time, the silence doesn't feel like absence. It feels like permission